Welcome to the AZ Political Podcast. I'm Jim Sharp. Headline number one, the U.S. and Britain announced plans for a trade deal on Thursday, which could lower consumers' financial burden from President Trump's bigly tariffs and create greater access for American goods abroad. If this is just the first of many deals, will it make all the Trump tariff turmoil worth it? Headline number two. For those who are trying to keep up this week, Attorney General of the state of Arizona, Chris Mays, filed to sue the Trump administration for the 15th, 16th, and 17th time. Suit number 15 attempts to block the president's executive order that stopped all wind energy projects. Number 16 looks to prevent the dismantling of the Department of Health and Human Services. And number 17 tries to stop the termination of electric vehicle infrastructure funding, which Trump pulled the plug on with an executive order in January. Now more than ever, somebody needs to check on Chris Mays and make sure she's getting enough me time. We asked her about this a couple weeks ago. Wanted to make sure she's got time to eat right and, take her vitamins and all that kind of stuff. Headline number three. According to Legislative District 8 Chair Stephen Jackson, there's still potential for Arizona Democratic Party Chairman Robert Branscombe to keep his job following a leaked letter calling for Branscombe to resign. Jackson says that Branscombe was asked to resign because he's lost the trust of Democrats who have been elected to office. So let's turn to our guest this week on the AZ Political Podcast, public affairs strategist, Democratic political consultant Tony Cani. Tony is a partner at Radar Strategies, a progressive political consulting firm. Tony spent, better part of 2 decades, right?
Yeah.
Working in municipal government, running political campaigns, managing legislative issues. In 2020, he served as the deputy state director for the Biden campaign. So welcome back to the AZ Political Podcast.
I'm happy to be here.
All right. So last week, when I had Republican consultant Matt Kenney on, he's a combat veteran, I asked him which is more brutal, combat or a Republican primary in Arizona. But the state Democratic Party seems to be trying to, be the rival of the AZ GOP when it comes to infighting. Is that a bit of an overstatement?
It's a little bit of an overstatement, and it's only an overstatement because infighting is a big word to use when everybody is agreeing and there's one person who they're disagreeing with, right? Okay. There's close to unanimity among the elected officials, among, county party elected officials or county party leaders that I've spoken with.
Yeah.
That the current chair, Branscombe, has sort of just lost their trust. And this isn't a fight about ideology. This is a fight about sort of trust and competence. And
what has he done to lose that trust?
Well, I there's a bunch of things that I've been hearing. I just think the big picture, there's some questions about judgment. And then additionally, so I'll go into that first. I mean, the idea that a dispute that he had with elected officials was something that went immediately to the media is something that, even if the things he was complaining about were true, which I believe weren't, it just shows bad judgment. That's not how you solve these problems. Political parties have these type of internal disputes all the time. It just happens. Yeah. And one of the things that you're supposed to do as chair is help mediate those things, help lower the temperature, help bring people together. But instead, what happened was he tried to blow everything up. And he did it in a way that really, I think, and this is a bit that I think people have missed a lot in this process is, in that letter that he wrote, he kind of implied that the statewide elected officials swooped in and complained about a decision that he made. The truth is that he created a committee to hire an executive director. As soon as he was elected chair, all these statewides had representatives who were meeting with him every week, which isn't a thing that happened before. So for me, I was like, you know what? They didn't get their person, but great. Everybody's sitting down, everybody's talking.
So
so they were on this hiring committee, and then all of a sudden he just he just sort of blew off the whole process he put together, picked somebody else. And when folks brought up concerns, he went nuclear, and it doesn't make sense.
So when you say statewide electeds, do you mean the top three? You mean Hobbs and Fontes and Mays, or do you also mean members of the legislature?
By statewide, I mean the two senators. I'm talking about the constitutional office holders. But look, I think that from my conversation with elected officials, this is a pretty widespread belief. I mean, look at one of the things that just happened right now. They just can't, the main job of the Democratic Party is to raise money, recruit candidates. And these statewide elected officials, they're the best fundraisers we've ever had, the Democratic Party in Arizona. I mean, they've together raised hundreds of $millions combined. They know what they're doing. And the current chair just had to cancel the big state party fundraising dinner. And the media knows about it. And they canceled it because only 11 people RSVP'd. That is because they clearly didn't invite people. I went and I looked. I was like, did I get invited to this dinner? I didn't. And so there is a competence question. They're spending more money right now than they're raising. And I think that is the kind of stuff that the precinct committee people, the executive people who put him in to that spot were hoping that this wouldn't be a problem. They thought that he would be someone who would work with them. And so I think that there's a chance that this could be resolved, that they could come to some sort of a deal, but there's other possibilities here too. And I think that this is a bummer. I wish we weren't talking about this. This is a distraction, but I don't think this is devastating for the Democratic Party as a whole, because if things don't get fixed, they're just going to, you spend the money elsewhere.
Well, it's not really ideal to cancel a fundraising dinner.
No, that's
either, right?
I was very, very surprised. As someone who worked at the state party, I was very surprised. That number, that 11 if that number is true,
you better hope they're really rich.
I mean, right. I mean, like, it just shows, that's an interesting thing. It shows that, like, they weren't, for whatever reason, the new executive director, the chair, they weren't doing the work to get people to sit down and go to that thing. Because even if there isn't a speaker, you can get people to go to a Democratic Party event, especially with how high enthusiasm is right now for Democrats, at least for, fighting against the Trump administration. So anyway, it's, I'm going a little bit too into detail about this, but I do think that this is problematic. I hope something is going to get resolved. I think that you're seeing with these state committee people, with these legislative district chairs, even with like the staff union, they've all raised concerns about some of the things that the current chair has said about it not being true. And when all those wagons start to circle like that in a party that, like, this doesn't boil into the public very often, but we don't get along, right? Like, there's all kinds of disputes about this stuff all the time.
Sure.
But when everybody's agreeing in that sort of unanimous way, I hope that, it makes sense if he were to resign or if he'd be replaced, or if not, that some other structure's put up until he does. Having worked inside the state party, would you ever consider being a state chairperson? Because, I mean, or having worked in there, would you ever consider being? It's a really, really hard job. Yeah. It's kind of a thankless job in a lot of ways, and it's not really that high profile. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where, like, I certainly would not ever decide to run for party chair. But what ends up happening is oftentimes you get asked by elected officials, hey, would you do this? And I don't know what I would say if I got asked. I would be like, I got to go talk to my wife about this.
My wife says I can't do it. My kids say I can't do it either.
Yeah, because it's just it's a huge commitment. Yeah. And and
unless you're Kelly Ward, it is not a high profile. Yeah, it's not. It's not supposed to be. Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's not supposed to be. Obviously, it is an important job, but if you're in the news as a state party chair, something's probably not going right. So if you were to pick one of the three of the state office holders that are from the Democratic Party, would Branscombe be more of a Katie Hobbs, more of a Adrian Fontes, or a Chris Mays guy? I think he was an everybody guy at the start of this. I think that, right? Is he a nobody guy now? And I think now he's sort of on an island. Oh boy. Yeah, that's not a good place to be. No, it's not. That's when your job is to unify the party. That's right. Right? Yeah. So you don't think that'll affect any Democrats running for office? I think it's going to create a lot of work that will have to get done if this isn't resolved. But I don't think in the end that it will have a huge material impact on the success of Democratic candidates. One, because, we're talking about it here because people who are listening to this are interested in this kind of stuff. Most voters aren't going to be in the end thinking this is some sort of an issue. Right. And then from like a fundraising and from a tactical, perspective, there's just alternatives. And, the Republican Party showed that in the past, where they ended up not supporting the state party and instead they were funding everything through a county party. And I think the big difference is that fight was about ideology. That fight was about, are you a Trumpy? Are you a this? And so, like, that's why it was so intense. And that, of course, you're still seeing that now with fights at the county level with the recorder and the supervisors. But this is different. This is just about,
is this the right guy to be running things?
Right.
And that's it.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, that's a perfect segue into what could happen in 2026 as far as Democratic chances for re-election of those three statewide office holders that I mentioned. And is there an opportunity in any way, shape, or form for Democrats to control the state superintendent's job or be back in the treasurer's office? Actually, I'm trying to remember the last time we had a Democratic treasurer, and it's not coming to me.
I honestly have no idea.
Yeah. But so let's talk about Katie Hobbs.
Yeah.
First off, because this is an important question to ask. Well, it's an important question that I'm going to ask second about Lieutenant Governor. But what are her taking off your cheerleader hat? Yeah. I know you worked at the state party and you are a Democrat and true. I know this about you. You're tried and true Democrat. What are Katie Hobbs' chances of re-election realistically? Mm-hmm. I mean, she's come out of her media shell, or I could probably come up with stronger wording for having to spend, 2 days out of the month with Bruce and Gatos, with their segment with her. But she's definitely looks like she's running for office again.
Sure. Yeah. And, and I think one of the things I'm glad that she's out there talking more to the media because I think she's good at it. I think that, when I've seen her at events where she's talking to a smaller group or a medium-sized group, I'm like, wow, she's so dynamic. I wish more of this was being presented to the public.
Yeah, because we don't see that in the media.
And I think people are starting to see that more and more, especially as she's really, being aggressive and pushing back on some things that are happening. I think that she has a good chance of being reelected, but I think it's always going to be hard for Democrats. It's going to be close. Like we're talking 20,000 votes is, you know what I mean? Like it's just very hard for Democrats. When we win, it's going to be close. And I think you can look at the power of her fundraising. And then when you look at the polling that has come out so far, like she's right in there for everybody, against everybody. And so I think it's going to be another fight. I think that the Republican primary is going to be very messy and very expensive. Yeah. And I am of the opinion that I don't think one of those candidates is stronger than the other on the Republican side, other than the amount of money that they will spend. And so I think she's got a good chance to make the case to the voters. And I think that aside from that, I do think that the mood and the temperature around things that are happening in the Trump administration is going to have an impact on the way people are voting. And, if the election was held today, I think that Democrats would be in a much stronger position. Things can change over the next several weeks, months. But I'm not a doomsday person about it. I honestly think she has a good chance. I think they all do.
Would you rather, as a Democrat, hoping for Hobbs's reelection, would you rather that she faced Andy Biggs or Karen Taylor Robes?
Geez, I don't know. And I legitimately don't have a preference because I think that both of them have vulnerabilities that when presented to the public will impact vote choice. I think with Robeson, with Taylor Robeson, she tries to present herself as a government outsider, as a business person. But, she's been a lobbyist for 25 years. That's the bulk of the business that she's done. She's not a government outsider. And I think that people...
Is there something wrong with lobbyists, by the way?
Well, I mean, listen, lobbyists, though...
Mr. Legislative Issues?
I've never been a lobbyist. Lobbyists when you're paid.
Okay, all right.
Anyway, that's a technical definition.
All right.
But I do think voters certainly don't like lobbyists. And I think that who knows this is her campaign because they go to great lengths to avoid saying that about her. So I think that's real vulnerability. And I think that there's not a strong track record of wealthy candidates in America self-financing and winning. That is
so she did do some of that the last go around, but this time around, it's been the majority of it has been donations. Sure. And then there's that PAC.
Well, I mean, but the news just came out yesterday that she had made a commitment to some of these Trump consultants that she had hired, that she would use her personal wealth to run ads that featured Trump. Yeah. And then there was a whole hubbub of them quitting or being fired. Quitting, I think, is what happened after they got their piece. But so I mean, I do think that there's an expectation that she will spend her personal wealth. I mean, the way people talk about her, it's the thing they say.
It's funny because a lot of people would say, well, Donald Trump, very successful. He didn't self fund.
No, he is amazing because he found a way to make money off of being a candidate instead of spending his own money. It's like, pretty unethical in a lot of ways, but in every way. But yeah, anyway. And then on Biggs, I think that he just does have a track record that he's more well known. And I think that will be, a strong thing for him. I think that have shown that there are voters in Arizona who are willing to look past some of these extreme ideologies, even though that's not the preference. But I do think he has super vulnerabilities when it comes to like the positions he's taken and the things that he's said. He's openly advocated against Medicaid in the past, things like that are really going to be hard for him to get away from.
Yeah, and winning a congressional district in the East Valley is a lot easier staying on message than it is to win a statewide election. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. That's 100% true. Yeah.
So Adrian Fontes, who, by the way, a lot of people were thinking, and nobody ruled out Chris Mays either for a while there, thinking that he might primary Governor Hobbs. I feel, and this is, I'm not a cheerleader one way or the other. I feel like he's got a pretty good chance of getting reelected. He's pretty plain spoken. I think a lot of people go, hey, he was a Marine.
I agree. And I was relieved when he chose not to run for Congress, because I do think it's better for Democrats to have an incumbent in that race. I wouldn't have been upset if he chose to pursue that race, but I do think he has a strong position. I think he's in a good position. I also think that everything else aside, voters don't really have a lot of trust when it comes to Republicans, when it comes to election administration. That is an issue. And so when that is the most public part of that job, it gives him, an opportunity, and people have seen him fight for their rights and that kind of stuff. And he, I think, is a strong candidate. And so, I think it's going to be really close. And that's one race where I think, who comes out of that primary, if it's Cullinan, who is, Freedom Caucus person, he raised like $2,000, during the first quarter. I think that he is an easy defeat. But I think that if it's somebody else, it'll be tough. I think it'll be close, like most of these races. And
I got to get back to the lieutenant governor question, but I'm going to move on real quickly to Chris Mays. Does she have time with all the lawsuits she's filing to run for re-election?
It'd be really great.
or are these lawsuits actually running for re-election?
Well, I think it would be excellent if the president stopped doing things that were illegal so that she stopped having to sue him. That would be great. She has a good track record of winning. I think that obviously she is very busy, but one of the things that will start coming out more in this campaign is she's gotten a lot of attention recently for these lawsuits, but she also, over the course of the past couple of years, has gotten a ton of media attention for the affirmative things she's done to sort of protect people and their consumer rights, and going after senior homes that were abusing people and the policies that they used to keep that abuse a secret, or, revamping her consumer rights department, which, Brnovich had swept money away from that to focus on other things. And, and they've announced that they had the highest percentage of sort of consumer complaints and things that they've resolved, which is a big part of that job. And so I think that when it comes to cost of living things and stuff that she's accomplished, she's got a great thing to run on. She's got a great record to run on. But again, she won by 280 votes last time. And so it's going to be definitely, these races will be close for Democrats.
Does she? And I think I'm pretty sure that Fontes's family has been in Arizona much, much longer, like, 100 generations or something like that. But I don't think she plays up her Arizona roots as much.
I think she grew up in Prescott, right?
Yeah. She's a very Arizona-ish person.
Yeah, when Prescott had 20,000 people when she was there. It's obviously just grown a little bit since then. And, and she talks more privately when she's talking to people about sort of her upbringing. She was raised by a school teacher and a neighborhood pharmacist, and she had a family tree farm that they basically helped give the trees to every. So she talks about how she drives around in Prescott and she sees these trees and she's like, oh, that's from my family. And I think I agree with you. I think she's hit that up when she's having conversations with people. But when it came to the amount of money that she was able to raise and spend in the last election as someone who was a Democrat who wasn't an incumbent, she didn't have maybe the amount of money that she would have liked to sort of tell that story. I think that will not be the case this time. I think that people will get to know her even better.
So I know one of the thoughts that was going through, I'm going to assume one of the thoughts that was going through Adrian Fontes's mind is, do I run for the top office, or do I get reelected to what was the second tier office, which will now be the third tier office, because we're going to have a lieutenant governor for the first time in our 2026 election, who, by the way, takes that job?
I don't know.
And does Hobbs pluck somebody out of the legislature?
She could. She could pick a tribal. She could pick somebody from business community. She could pick
a tribal leader. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of strong leaders that could be considered for that position who, this will be the first time that we've had a lieutenant governor. And one of the things that will be unique about it compared to other states is that the lieutenant governor will have responsibility for doing work in the office, right? Like they'll either have to be your chief of staff or they'll be an agency head or something like that. And I think that there's a lot of, so you're going to be picking somebody with some competence at administration. And I think that there's, a bunch of people she could choose from. And I think there's people who probably want that job, but I don't, I am glad that I'm not a part of having to make that decision, because I do think, especially if it's the first time making that decision, I think it's going to be a tough decision.
Well, and this is kind of odd because I don't think they maybe thought this all the way through, because they're supposed to be, kind of a director of something. Mm-hmm. And how does that confirmation process work with a Republican controlled,
I don't know. I actually don't know the answer. I always thought like, oh, okay, great. If Democrats take over the legislature, this is one way that we can get past the Hoffman, ridiculous, committee. But yeah, I don't actually know how that works. I'll be honest. See, that's a big thing about the lieutenant governor thing. We don't have any idea. It's
uncharted territory.
We don't have any idea how this works. So,
yeah. So that'll be interesting, too, though. That person will be able to walk around forever saying, I was the first lieutenant governor of Arizona.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you think the lieutenant governor gets an executive mansion before the governor gets one? 'Cause we don't have one here.
No. I remember when I first started working out here in 2004, I remember we had a volunteer who came back to the state party headquarters where I was working, and they were like, I just met the governor. I was like, what were you at events? Like, no, I knocked on her door. And so like, it is,
Janet Napolitano.
Yeah, Napolitano. It's it is true. Like it's a very Arizona thing that we don't have a governor's mansion, right?
I kind of like it in a way.
I do too. I'm sure it's frustrating. It'd be nice to be able to have events and these kinds of things that normal executives get to do, but it's very Arizona that we don't have one.
Yeah, I guess if we had one, it'd have to look, be all Adobe and.
Yeah, at this point, the Republican legislature 20 years ago would have sold the house to somebody. We'd have been paying rent. There would have been a landlord, and so maybe it's better to just avoid it.
That's funny. Any surprises you see coming on the horizon for 2026?
I mean, I just think that there's so much volatility and uncertainty, and people right now of all persuasions politically, there's an increased anxiety about the economy and it's impacting people's decisions. Mm-hmm. And I think that one of the things that was a huge lesson from 2022 from 2024 was that, Democrats just basically would, for the most part, I mean, this is an exaggeration, but they point to a chart and say, no, the economy's good, right? Yeah. And there were strong signs. And I think that if Republicans are sort of taking a similar tactic now, like where they're basically like, no, things are great. And so I think I think the state of the economy is going to play a big role, and we'll know more in like the next year or so. And I'm not cheering for a recession.
Right.
I really hope that this gets worked out, but I do think that like this volatility and the uncertainty that's been sort of thrown into the system with the way that President Trump has executed some of these things, I think that it's going to hurt him. And we've already seen in the polling, it's really, the trust in him has dropped a tremendous amount.
Yeah, it really has, especially when it comes to the economy. Although it is interesting, I was pointing out to my morning show partner, LaDonna Harvey, this morning. I was looking at the S&P chart, and because I was anticipating this UK-US trade agreement. And, if this is just the one of first, boy, maybe things will be okay, right? And we've gained back about half of what we lost since Inauguration Day on the S&P. Mm-hmm. So maybe it might all turn around, and then, maybe take that off the table for Democratic candidates.
Look, I hope so. I hope that this happens, but in the sense that not the Democratic candidate part, but that things are good in the economy. But
because you and I still got to pay bills,
right? That's true. Yeah. The challenge here is that the uncertainty impacts hiring and layoff decisions, regardless of how the stock market is doing.
Right.
And so, one of the things that really people are already seeing is that people are getting laid off when they didn't expect to get laid off, and I think to some extent, there are companies that use this type of thing as an excuse to reduce their workforce and reduce the amount of money that they're paying, especially with AI and all these things. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the most consequential things that is happening right now that's sort of behind the scenes is that, that President Trump helped to dismantle essentially the, Labor Department, who does these these worker rights, these worker protections. And so as companies are making these decisions to slash and cut, there's no one really there who is going to be able to sort of help protect the rights of these workers. And so, I'm not saying that in itself is an issue, but I think that the pain that voters and families are anticipating and that they're feeling, I think that it's a huge issue.
All right. Well, to summarize with Tony here, number one, he doesn't feel like the Democratic state party is burning down. He thinks,
or rather, if it burns down, we'll be fine.
Okay, there you go. That the current party chair has an opportunity to maybe stay in that position, the Democratic Party chair, and if asked, he has no interest in being state party chair. Well,
tough gig.
Unless they ply you with liquor and lots of money.
Well, that wouldn't do it, and obviously they would not be offering a lot of money. Right?
All right.
It's Anyway, yeah.
All right. Hey, great to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks.
Again.
It's great. We'll do an awkward shake from the camera.
There we go. All right. Thanks again to Toni Cani for joining us here, and thank you for watching the AZ Political Podcast. I'm Jim Sharp, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for watching the AZ Political Podcast with Jim Sharp. Click the box to watch more from KTAR News and tap the button in the middle to subscribe.